Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone, members, officers and members of the public to this meeting of the Planning Control Committee. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee clerk, Chanel Wickham, to explain how proceedings will work. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The rules of debate. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted to your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. When the public participants are invited to speak, their microphones will be made live by the committee officer. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room, and the results will be visible on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the chair will have the casting vote. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Item 1, apologies for absence. I received apologies from Councillors Sean Nolan, Nigel Mason and Ian Moody. Having given due notice, Councillor Ian Mantle will be substituting for Councillor Nolan. Councillor David Stanley will be substituting for Councillor Mason. And Councillor Michael Muir will be substituting for Councillor Moody. Are there any further apologies? Thank you. Item 2, minutes. There are 3 sets of minutes, the 16th of November, 30th of November and 7th of December 2023. I propose that we take as read and approve the minutes of the meetings held on those 3 dates as true records of proceedings. This only involves the councillors who were there for those meetings. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Tyson, thank you.
Yep, happy to second that, Chair.
Any comments on the minutes? Okay. Chanel, should we go to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 3, notification of the business. There is none. Item 4, Chair's announcements. Recording. Accordance with the Council policy, this meeting is being recorded. Recording will be available both on the Council's YouTube channel as well as in the Council's ModGov site alongside the documents from this meeting. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights are set out on the Chair's announcements on the agenda. To clarify matters for registered speakers, members of the public have 5 minutes for each group of speakers, supporters and objectors. There's a separate 5-minute time limit allocated to member advocates. A warning will be given at 4 minutes to alert you have 1 minute left. At 5 minutes, you'll be advised that the time allowed has ended and the speaker will cease. Section 4.8.23a, the purpose of clarification. In order to vote on an agenda item at this meeting, a member must be present for the entirety of the debate and consideration of that item. If a member leaves the room at any point of the item, they will not be able to vote. Public participation. We have Parish Councillor Norton Mahi. Thank you. And Mr. Sav Patel. Thank you. We're going to go on to item 6, at which point I'm going to ask Councillor Tyson to leave the top table because he is a member advocate for this item. Thank you. Item 6. 22/03094, land between Huntsridge and Ashwell House, 5 High Street, Ashwell. Alex Howard to present, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Just 3 updates for you. This application was previously being dealt with by an officer who no longer works at this local planning authority. That officer did not file a photograph of an erected site notice, and having checked with the agent, they were unable to provide proof that it was erected. As this is a legal requirement, I printed off a new site notice and erected it on the 5th of January this year to ensure that this requirement could not be challenged further down the line. There are no changes to the proposal, and the application is obviously still being considered tonight. We just won't be able to process the committee decision until after the 27th of January. I received an email from Ashwell Parish Council on the 11th of January with their formal Section 106 contribution claim for this proposal, which has sought contributions towards the pavilion project and the gifting of public open space. The Parish Council requested that members be made aware of this, and provision for this has already been included in the heads of terms in my report. And finally, I circulated an addendum to my committee report on Thursday, the 18th of January, that clarified an error in my report. I had referred to the June 2022 version of the NPPF in section 2.2 of my report, and the NPPF has since been revised in December 2023. So if we go to the slides, please. No. Thank you. So this identifies the application site, which is a rectangular piece of land located to the north of Ashwell Street and the south of dwellings on Lucas Lane, Ashwell. The site is approximately 1.18 hectares and is currently used for the grazing of sheep. The topography of the site is such that it slopes upwards from the northeast corner to the southwest corner. The site is within the Ashwell settlement boundary and the Ashwell conservation area, as well as an archaeological area. Next slide, please. This is an aerial view of the site from Google Maps, showing the relationship with buildings in the immediate and wider area. The site is bounded by a residential development on 3 sides. Next slide, please. And this is a photo on Ashwell Street looking east, where surface upgrading is proposed to facilitate the formation of the access to the site. Next slide, please. This shows the existing field gate on Ashwell Street. Views from this position are referred to as viewpoint 10 in the Ashwell Conservation Area Character Appraisal and Management Plan, and significant view 12 of the Ashwell Neighbourhood Plan. Next slide, please. And this is just a photo showing beyond the field gate. This is the part of the site that would be public open space. Next slide, please. And this is another photo from the beyond the field gate, and this is looking towards where the proposed dwellings and access would be located. Next slide, please. And this is a photo on Ashwell Street looking west towards Hunts Ridge, which is the immediate neighbouring property. Next slide, please. This shows the site through the trees on Ashwell Street, approximately where the proposed access would be located. Next slide, please. And this is just another photo of the site from Ashwell Street, where the access road is proposed. Built form would be located to the right and open space on the left. It's already moved. So this is a photo of the easternmost point of the site, with 22 Lucas Lane located on the other side of that hedgerow. A new footway cycle link is proposed here through the site towards Lucas Lane. Next slide, please. And this is just another photo of the eastern part of the site where the dwellings would be located. Next slide, please. And this photo just shows another vantage point of where the proposed footway and cycle link on Ashwell Street would be proposed. Next slide, please. These images have been lifted from the submitted design access statement, showing several views from on and off the site. Next slide, please. And this image has been lifted from the submitted landscape visual impact assessment, which shows the site beyond Ashwell Cricket Club and the recreation ground. Next slide, please. So this is just the location plan of the site. Next slide, please. This is the proposed site plan. showing the split of built form from the public open space and the access onto Ashwell Street in the southern part. Next slide, please. This is the proposed access plan onto Ashwell Street. Next slide, please. And this is the proposed landscape strategy plan. Next slide, please. And this is the proposed parking plan. Next slide, please. These next few slides just show illustrative street scenes of the proposal. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And these next few slides show the various house types in the elevation form as part of the proposal. Next slide, please. 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 This is the bungalows proposed on site, that one. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I think one more left. Next slide, please. Thank you. And finally, these next few slides show the various proposed floor plans from the different house types. So next slide, please. And there's just a couple more slides just showing these proposed floor plans. I think that's it. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alex. Are there any questions for Alex? Any questions? No? Kerry?
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't aware that the site notice, there was an issue with the applicant not putting it on the site. And I note that you said you've placed it and in the planning applicant's absence on the 5th of January. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 21 days for the notice to go up on the site and also in the newspaper of the application. So it ensures anybody that has comments or an interest to have that time to submit it. But what I'm thinking is if it's the 5th of January, that 21 days would expire on the 26th of January. Yeah. I'd be happy to hear your perspective on the insufficient time.
Sean?
We suspect very much that the site notice was put up some time ago, but the site notice was put up just to make sure publicity in the local press and neighbour notification was carried out. Well, shortly after the application was submitted in 2022. So the site notice was put up just to make sure that a site notice was put up. My understanding is that we've had many. Everyone knows about this application in the area. We've had a lot of responses. So what we should not do is issue any decision one way or another until after the expiry of this latest site notice. If, of course, we get any new comments following any decision or resolution that this committee makes, then we would come back to planning committee with those new comments, but that's very unlikely to happen. So you can resolve when we consider these applications, we often resolve to either grant planning permission or subject to Section 106. And the decision notice isn't issued for many, many months after the Section 106 has been agreed. In this instance, if you were to resolve, obviously, to grant planning permission, the same situation would be the case. We would continue to negotiate on the Section 106 obligations and a decision notice issued some time in the future. If you were to accept the officer recommendation to refuse planning permission, then we would not issue the decision notice until after the 26th of January.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does answer the question because what Sean has explained with planning committee, once the decision is made, it's ratified, but it's not a done deal as yet. So what Sean is reassuring is that if there's any additional comments that come in up to the 26th, that's material. He has promised to bring it back because it's important that decision makers have all the relevant facts that relate to planning considerations to make a good decision that's valid and that can't be challenged. So that is a way forward.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Allen?
Why was this brought here now as opposed to being put across to the next planning meeting? Is it because there was a timescale aspect?
It was brought to this committee because the matter does not prevent it from being considered by the committee. The site notice was put up in terms to ensure that a belt and braces approach was applied. We suspect very much that the site notice was put up. There just wasn't a photograph on file to prove it, basically.
And your question?
It does. It just seems that it would have been more pertinent to push this along to the next meeting.
Can I now ask Parish Councillor Norton Mahi to speak? You have 5 minutes. Okay. When you're ready, please.
Thank you. I will be very brief. First of all, I'd like to start out by saying that the Parish Council endorses the recommendations that the Senior Planning Officer has made in respect to this application. However, I'd also like to say on that topic that the objections that we raised in the original application still stand as far as the Parish Council is concerned. And I understand that highways currently don't have any particular problem with the application, but we are still quite concerned about safety aspects of access from the western side, particularly with the junction between Kingsland Way and Ashwell Street, which was actually off your access plan shown a few moments ago. But I mean, that really is the main concern that we have that has been put aside in this report. Should you decide to approve this application, then we would like our Section 106 claim to be considered, and we would like to be part of the negotiations with the developer to finalise any Section 106 agreement. And that really concludes the comments that I would like to make at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any points of clarification for the Norton members? Thank you. Can I please call on Member Advocate Councillor Tom Tyson?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would also like to just say a few words in support of the officer's recommendation to refuse this application. First of all, I'd like to thank the officers for their work on this, especially Mr. Howard. Councillor May just alluded to the refusal in 2020 of the previous application on this site. There's not a lot of difference between the two, except that this one contains an attempt to make the application somewhat more palatable, which I acknowledge, by reserving some of the land for public use as a gift to the Parish Council. However, this doesn't bring us much further. It's an attempt to sweeten the pill, as it were, but it doesn't actually resolve some of the policy conflicts that have been raised previously and are in Mr. Howard's report again before you at the moment. And these are policies which are there to protect the heritage assets, which is the Ashwell Conservation Area, to protect the last remaining open space on that southern side of Ashwell Street, rather grandly named as a street. In fact, the locals refer to it as the Ruddery, and you saw some pictures of the way that looks after a very wet winter. And it's not really a road that you can use currently for motorized traffic, and it would need to be considerably upgraded in order to serve as the access road for this proposed development. And one of the aspects that we're particularly keen to preserve in the village is this very distinctive rural track, which dates back at least to medieval times, and is a significant part of that heritage asset. So there are two serious issues that this application has to confront, which is the sight lines, the significant views into the village down the slope from the top there on the Ruddery, and also the impact on the Ruddery itself. And both of those are got into in some detail in Mr. Howard's report, so I won't dwell on that any further. I would like to say that the report also makes it quite clear that there's three levels of legislation working in concert on this, which is the National Planning Framework, our local plan, and also the Ashwell Neighbourhood Plan, which I'd like to commend to everyone here and everyone in the public as well that's listening to this, because I think it's really important that the policies in the neighbourhood plan are given full weight, and they have been here, as is completely right and proper. So I'm delighted with that, and hopefully members will decide to support the recommendation to refuse this application on those policy grounds in particular. Third issue that's been raised as well is the lack of Section 106 agreements. And as it turns out, those are the same three grounds for refusal which existed in 2020 when the previous proposal came to this committee. And so I'd be very hopeful that members will reproduce that verdict of a refusal in this particular case as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Do we have any points of clarification from members? Councillor Tyson? Can I pass to South Patel, the planning agent?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. I speak on behalf of my client, Manor Oak Homes, in support of this revised detailed planning application for 14 dwellings, including 5 affordable homes and extensive public open space. In order to address the previous refusal reasons, the applicant has significantly amended the proposal by reducing the number of dwellings and incorporating the key heritage views into the scheme. The proposed development is now a more comprehensive proposal that responds to the local context and specifically the housing needs of Ashwell. As such, we consider the revised schemes now acceptable in planning and heritage terms. I have the following points I'd like to make in support of this planning application. The site is located within the extended settlement boundary of Ashwell, a Category A village, which is a sustainable location for development where the local plan and neighbourhood plan respective policies SP2 and Ash 1 support development. No new housing allocations are proposed in Ashwell, as any future housing growth is proposed to be provided within the extended settlement boundary. Under Section 4, titled Ashwell, paragraph 13.5 of the local plan, it states the boundary has been drawn so as to allow for Ashwell's development needs during this plan period. The site is also surrounded on 3 sides by housing development and is a sustainable location, being within close proximity to the village centre and local amenities. Therefore, as no new housing allocations are proposed in the local plan and Ashwell neighbourhood plan, and any future growth is to be provided within the extended settlement boundary, the housing development, such as the scheme before you, is not only considered acceptable in principle, as confirmed by the officer report, but also the only sustainable way Ashwell can meet its housing needs for the rest of the current plan period. With regards to the heritage concerns, in order to mitigate the concerns of the previous 24 dwelling scheme, the proposed dwelling has been significantly reduced to 14 dwellings, comprising a mix of mainly 2 and 3 bed dwellings, including 2 bungalows. The housing development has been laid out on the eastern side of the site. The western half of the site would remain open and used as public open space, maintaining the View 10 from the field gate on Ashwell Street in perpetuity. Aside from this view, the site is not mentioned in the recently updated Ashwell Character Appraisal for having any specific heritage value in itself. The proposal would, however, open up newly publicly accessible views west towards St Mary's Church and the village core, which we consider would provide additional public benefit in heritage terms. The proposed dwellings have been designed to be up to 1.5 stories in height and incorporate local architectural features to complement and blend in with the local context. The submitted landscape assessment contains before and after viewpoints of the site from the surrounding locations, including the field gate on Ashwell Street, and demonstrates that the proposed dwellings would not appear intrusive on views north or have any significant detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area, particularly when viewed as a whole. Nevertheless, the Conservation Officer has identified that the proposal as having less than substantial harm to the character and appearance of the conservation area. On this basis, paragraph 208 of the NPPF states that harm should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal. The following benefits of the proposal are considered to carry significant weight. The housing development in a sustainable location comprising a mix of mainly small dwellings, including bungalows, in accordance with the housing mix policy of Ash 2 of the Neighbourhood Plan and the housing needs survey contained within the Neighbourhood Plan. Dwellings currently designed to complement and enhance the unique character of Ashwell within the small scheme capable of being delivered by a local builder, provide accessible and adaptable standard housing above policy requirement, provide 35% affordable housing above policy requirement, provide over 25% biodiversity net gain well above policy requirement, provide 50% of the site area as public open space well above the local plan policy requirement and would maintain the key heritage views in perpetuity, provide a new publicly accessible view corridor towards the village centre and St Mary's Church to enhance the conservation area experience, provide future homes standard energy efficient dwellings, including EV charging for all dwellings, which is above policy requirement, provide a public access link from Ashwell Street to Lucas Lane to enhance the sustainability and connectivity of the site. Therefore, the combination and the amount of dwellings would arise from the proposed development would, in our view, far outweigh the less than substantial harm identified by the conservation area.
Finish your sentence, please.
Conservation Officer. In summary, the site is in a sustainable location within the settlement boundary, designed to sympathetically blend into site context and respond specifically to the housing needs of Ashwell.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any points of clarification for Sav? No. Can I invite the officer to respond to any issues raised, please?
Nothing further to add, Chair.
Can I have a proposer? This Councillor Allen.
I propose that we refuse this as per the recommendation.
And a seconder, please. Councillor Stanley.
I'm happy to second.
So we have pros and seconder to accept the officer's recommendation for refusal. Should we go to debate? Councillor Peace.
Sorry, I was going to second it.
Councillor Mansell.
Thank you. I am a little concerned
If this field is effectively, you're saying, not developable, why is it included within the Ashwell local plan and the district local plan as a potentially developable site? Am I misunderstanding something, or is it effectively the fact that no development on this field would be acceptable?
You can answer.
The site is within the settlement boundary of Ashwell, and also within Ashwell Conservation Area. The fact that it is within the settlement of Ashwell means that residential development would be acceptable in principle on this site. But the settlement boundary designation does not automatically lead to a conclusion that residential development would be acceptable on the site. Each application is considered on its own merits, and we have gone out to consultation, and as an important consultee on this matter was Historic England and the Conservation Officer. And both of them say that the proposal would cause less than substantial harm to the heritage significance of the conservation area. And it is on that basis that it's recommended for refusal, not on the basis that residential development would be unacceptable in principle. Now, the site, from what I can see, does make an important and positive contribution to the conservation area as open space. That isn't to say that it would not be possible necessarily to achieve some form of development on the site that would comply with policy and planning judgment in terms of ensuring that significant harm or less than substantial harm would be caused to the conservation area. So that's a rather long-winded response, I'm afraid, to say that in principle, housing development is acceptable within the settlement boundary, but that doesn't automatically mean that we should grant planning permission for housing in the settlement boundary if there are other harms.
Did you want to a follow-up question, Councillor Mantle?
Thank you. I'm still a little concerned as to how any development would be acceptable to the conservation officer and to the planning department on this site. It seems to me that it's not a particularly attractive site. From the pictures, it looks like a mess, and sheep grazing is one thing. But I'm a little bit concerned that what we're actually saying is, yes, this is a site which could be developed, but there's no actual practical way in which it ever would be able to be developed without offending the principles of the conservation area. Am I misunderstanding something?
That's certainly an interpretation of matters, but as I said earlier, we don't oppose the principle, and the committee report is very clear on that, the principle of residential development, and we will consider each application on its own merits. This particular scheme, we found, would cause harm, as it's set out in the report, to the heritage asset, namely conservation area. It may well be possible that another scheme, on balance, would, for example, be much lower within the spectrum of less than substantial harm, and we would weigh that up against the benefits. I don't think the report basically says we would never approve any form of development on this site, but we've considered the scheme that's been put forward.
Thank you. Can I go on to another question? Is that okay? Yeah. Councillor Levitt, please.
Thank you, Chair. Is it possible we could put up the aerial view again?
James working on it. Is that the one you wanted?
No, the aerial view, the photograph, the Google Maps one. That one. See, I'm struggling with this one. I really am, because as Councillor Mantle said, It's not actually open space at the moment because it's quite heavily hedged in by trees and the boundaries along the road. It's not open space that affords views into the village and across the conservation area. And if you look at the buildings to the east there, where they're fairly new developments, where the hedgerow has been taken down, the trees have been taken down, there's much clearer views through and across. In 4.3.12, there's a paragraph in there, conservation to conclude, AHC, Historic England, myself, all conclude that there would be less than substantial harm occasioned to the Ashwell Conservation Area. And I think I go along with that. I can't see any real problem with this development. It provides homes that are needed. It's within the core of the village, as it's now defined. It does open up the views. It provides an area of public open space, and it's not public open space at the moment. So actually, I don't agree with the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bloxham?
Thank you. Yeah, I would share the concern that Councillor Mantle has, and would say exactly what Councillor Levitt has said as well. When you look at that, I don't see that as I'm reading here, a substantial area of Solomanian opportunity to, where are we? Nestled in the valley to the north and unfettered by development in the fore and midground. I don't know. That looks to me like an ideal opportunity to use for development. It certainly might be an open space that people can use and can use for grazing and things like that, but it doesn't seem like a very useful area for anything other than maybe development with housing and things like that. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you. Other comments? Could I possibly just remind you of some of the things that have been said by speakers that you may consider you want to follow up? To do with the sight lines, the impact on Ruddery Lane, Ashwell Street, lack of Section 106 agreement, number of dwellings going down. I think a lot of things being about policy requirements. There's quite a lot in the speakers' presentations that you might consider. Councillor Levitt?
Yeah, I'll just say, Chair, that Section 106 agreements, we quite often don't have them in place beforehand, and we can condition Section 106 agreements, so there wouldn't really be an issue with that. So in its own, yes, it is a reason for refusal, but it can be conditioned if we don't refuse it.
Thank you. Councillor Allen?
I just wanted to say the reason that I feel that we should refuse this is all laid out in front of us. There are good and sensible legal reasons. And as long as we can come up with good and sensible legal reasons for approving this, I would say go ahead. But I'd be very wary of going against the recommendations we have.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I'm just waiting to see if there's any more comments in the debate. Councillor Muir?
Thank you, Chair. I do know this site fairly well. I do believe it's ripe for development, and the planned layout, keeping the houses on the left and on the west side open space for everybody in Ashwell to use, I don't see any problems with this development at all, and I will go against the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Muir. Any more comments? Are we ready? Sorry, Councillor Mantle.
Yeah, I think it's a point that if we don't go with the recommendation, we would still then have to decide what the way forward was and what the appropriate conditions are, because clearly that isn't in the recommendation at the moment. So if the proposal to refuse is not accepted, that is the time at which we start wondering about things like the Section 106 agreements and any other conditions which we would want to impose.
Thank you, Councillor Bloxham.
Sorry, I'm just thinking, would this, I mean, we seem to be a bit of an impasse, and I wonder whether, not wanting to delay anything, but whether a site visit might be an appropriate thing at this point to get a better idea. I don't know whether other councils have been down. I certainly haven't been down to have a look at the site, and I'm going by this. So there's an element there of me not knowing the area. I don't know whether Councillor Allen has been to the site and had a look at the views, but and that's not to be detrimental to what he's putting forward as proposing this. But I just wonder whether it might be, being as it looks as though there's that impasse, whether a site visit might be appropriate to actually get a good feel for this.
Can I have some sort of reaction on that suggestion, please? I know that my feeling is that we have got the maps. It is assumed that we will have visited the site, and that we know the site already. So, Councillor Allen.
As we all know, sitting on planning, we do a lot of research into these things in advance. If you feel you need to visit the site in advance, that's something you need to do in advance. You have all of the paperwork ahead, you know exactly where it is, and you're very welcome to visit it then. Organised site visits are wonderful if you can attend them. I know a lot of us have full-time jobs, but this is something that needs to be done and not discussed in the middle of the actual planning meeting for that item.
Right. Councillor Bloxham, can you give your reply, please?
Well, thanks for your comments, Councillor Allen. I do my best to have a look at these things, but I was going to suggest maybe we look at what I was quite impressed with was the actual image of the site that was proposed. So after the picture that we've just seen up there of as existing, but the actual site plan as it is once it's been developed. And I thought that was very in keeping with it was just a very nice development. But yeah, I think it's probably going to be down to the vote, isn't it?
Okay. Are we ready to vote? Anybody else want to comment before we vote? So you are voting, let me get this right. You are voting yes to accept the officer's recommendation, which is refusal.
That's correct, yes. So vote yes for the refusal of the application as per the officer's recommendation.
Have the vote, please, Chanel.
Chair, that motion is carried.
So we have decided to accept the officer's recommendation. Thank you. Can Councillor Tyson come back in his rightful place, please? Okay. Item 7, planning appeals. Can I go to Sean Greaves?
Thank you, Chair. This is obviously an item for information, but since the last meeting, we've had 2 appeals submitted. They're both householder appeals, and they're set out on page 57 of the report. And then after page 57, we have appeal decisions that we've received since the last meeting. And at the end of those appeal decisions on page 77, there's the start of the table that sets out those appeal decisions. They are on the whole, all been dismissed. There was one decision that was part allowed and part dismissed, and that reflected the split decision that the council made. So all those appeal decisions supported the council's decision on those applications. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Sean on the appeals? No. The report is for noting. So that is the end of our business. So I will close the meeting at 20:15. The next meeting of PCC is on the 15th of February. Thank you.